Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining our, thank you and welcome actually to the second part of our two-part webinar series commemorating the Navtej Singh Johar judgment. For those of you who attended our first webinar, we had a very stimulating discussion with our legal experts, Arvind Narayan and Shweta Santani, on the Navtej Johar judgment. That recording will be available for those of you who could not watch it or who could not watch the entire panel discussion in its entirety. That recording will also be made available on the Rainmaker website in the next few days. So do have a look if you were not able to attend that session. Today, we have a panel. This is the second of the two-part series. So today we have a panel that will share their life experiences and insights while discussing the Pride movement from an Indian perspective, especially in the light of the Navtej Johar judgment. One of our panelists, Suresh Ramdas, will unfortunately not be joining us today as he's unwell. We'll all miss his valuable insights very, very much. I personally will. But I also want to take the opportunity to wish him speedy recovery, and I look forward to having him join us for future panel discussions. So without further ado, I'm going to get right to it and start with an introduction to our panelists. First up, Rumi, also known as Mx Rumi Sharma, is a TEDx speaker, human rights youth activist, and educator who is on a journey to spread awareness about LGBTQ+ issues, raise voices against any form of injustice, and inspire people to be their true self. They've also been featured at many media platforms like Times of India, Pune Times, Midday, Mirror Now, The Quint, Marathwada, and Sakal. Apart from human rights, they also talk about the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and lifestyle with regard to breaking the very barriers that limit us from realizing our larger purpose in our lives. They envision a world where we believe in living in love as we interact with the various layers of the world. Skilled in non-profit organizations, coaching, public speaking, and motivational speaking. Rumi, welcome, and thank you very much for sort of joining our panel discussion today, especially at the last minute. We are deeply grateful that you could join us at short notice and stand in for Suresh. While I provided a brief introduction, I think it would be terrific if you could share with us your life journey and experiences so that, particularly for the benefit of all of us, as well as those who are attending the panel discussion, it will give them a greater insight into your life journey. So if we could start with that, and I'll then move on to introducing Deepa and Zainab as well.
Definitely. Thank you, Anthony, for such a sweet introduction. And I'm, in fact, honored to be a part of this initiative and a panel which has my inspirations on it. So it's an honor to share the same panel as the both panelists that we have today. So hi, everybody. I am Rumi. I am a human rights youth activist. I'm training to be a mind coach, and basically that's my passion. I come from a lot of privilege. I represent the privileged queer people that exist. I had a lot of privilege growing up. I had accepting parents, I had accepting friends, I had the right kind of information to grow up with as a queer person. But regardless of that, I think I have had a long journey to reach a point where I could identify myself with a label and go beyond it. Why I say beyond is because I think a lot of queer people face difficulty at workspaces, at schools and colleges to create an identity for themselves, which is apart from they being queer. Often queerness becomes all about their identity. So I think I am on a journey where I'm also defined by my talent as well as the identity that I bring to the table. I think that is very important. My personal journey as a queer person started when I was 5 years old. I think that young, and I have forgotten many instances of me feeling dysphoric, but the one that stays with me always is when my dad used to shave. I would always feel that, I wanted to be like him, not just because I love my dad, but also because, he would shave and I would feel that, there's something missing. I would go up to him and say, Dad, even I want to shave. And that became a very, very funny, intimate thing that we did. He would just apply shaving cream on my face and I would just use a toilet or tea to pretend that I was shaving. it's funny how everybody would think that, children do it. You give them spoons and plates and they make a game out of it. But slowly I realized that that became the only space where I, as a queer person, I, as a gender fluid person, felt the most comfortable in my skin. Uh, and these instances added up to reach to a point where I felt completely uncomfortable with my body, completely dysphoric, and I couldn't understand why it was happening. What a lot of queer people also face is lack of vocabulary. You definitely know what you're going through. Not that we don't know what we are going through, but we don't have words and vocabulary to express our feelings. And that happened with me too. Midway when I hit puberty as a person with a womb, I started menstruating. And for me, I didn't identify as being a young girl. So to expect that, I am going to be this adult woman was quite a pressure. And that actually put me in a space where I started doubting myself, started doubting my body, and I didn't feel comfortable. Uh, I was bullied a lot in school. I chose to be an openly queer person in school, and although it was a hard journey for me, when I left school, I realized that I had created a revolution there where people were starting to talk about LGBT. People were starting to talk about what lesbian was or what gender fluid was, in fact. Right. So that was there. And after 10th, a lot of things happen, like online blackmailing, bullying, and all of that. But fast forward to a time where in 2016, I decided to come out to my parents. And I knew that there was no going back after that. Why I decided that was because I knew that I wanted to be an activist. I wanted to talk about my story because there wasn't much representation of LGBT people out there. When I was younger, I would watch TEDx talks and be inspired by it and think that, one day I would also give that. And to do that, I realized that I would have to be visible. Uh, you know, I have had instances where a rainbow flag somewhere has saved somebody's life, right? Just me talking about my journey or my relationship has helped somebody in a small town to just accept themselves. I think being visible has really helped me, reach out to a lot of people. So yeah, when I came out to my parents, the only thing that they said was, हमको ये फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि तुम lesbian हो, हमें ये फर्क पड़ता है कि तुम एक अच्छे इंसान हो. And that broke a lot of barriers for me because I come from a lot of biases and stereotypes too. Right. I had these stereotypes about my own community or about different communities to realize that regardless of all these layers that we have, right, this diversity that we have, we also have so many similarities. I think as many diversity and differences that we have, we also have similarities as a human being who has a heart. We have all these common emotions that we go through in our lifetime, and that really, binds us together as human beings. And that's why I think we are doing this session where, around 30, 32 people are together sharing a space, sharing a heart-centered space, in fact, talking about our own journeys. So I think be my personal story. And my effort is to just spread as much awareness as possible and make the domino roll. Something that as activists and as educators, we all understand is we solely cannot reach out to millions and crores of people that exist on Earth, but it is definitely possible with the domino effect. Maybe I have something to share with you, and you can take it forward to your family, to your friends, to your teachers, to your children, in fact. So that is what I think. And I think it's beautiful to be here to celebrate this month. Section 377 and all of that has brought changes, but there is a long way to go ahead. And these spaces will enable that. I think that's about it. That's from me, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Rumi. I mean, your journey, I think, is inspirational in the sense of everything that you had to battle and Yet you have achieved so much already, and I'm sure you're already an inspiration to many who look up to you as somebody who is a role model for change. And lovely to hear about your parents and the way they've sort of taken the news. And in India, that's hard, but as you rightly said, privilege. Many of us are privileged to have parents who love us unconditionally, and it's always a delight to hear that. So thank you so much for joining our panel. And I am going to now move ahead. I realize that this was only the introduction, but I'm already so moved by what you just said, by the story that you shared. So I'm going to go on with our second panelist. Deepa Shankar is our second panelist. Deepa is the founder of Authentic Consulting, a boutique firm that works with organizations to power diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's based in Mumbai and is a facilitator, leadership coach, and a writer. Deepa holds 2 decades of human resources experience, including holding roles in diversity and inclusion and organizational development. She sees herself as a catalyst in creating an inclusive culture. She also speaks at forums to educate and share her perspectives on inclusion. In March 2019, Deepa published her first book, Voices of Inclusion, which explores topics of bias, inequality, and inclusion through a unique collection of haiku, haibun, and illustrations. Deepa, uh, you have been a friend of Rainmaker for many years now, so delighted to have you as a part of this panel, and would love to hear your journey and experiences in your words as well, for the benefit of all our participants today.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm delighted to be here again. Thanks, everybody, and happy to be a part of this session today. So when I talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and my journey, and I heard Rumi share, and thanks, Rumi, for sharing your story. And a lot of points came to my mind in terms of took me back to my years in corporate. That's where I started. That's where I worked for a very long time before starting on my own. And when I was in corporate is when I first started doing some work in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion. And it started with providing safe workplaces. So actually it was in the space of prevention of sexual harassment that I actually ventured into DEI or inclusion, so to say. But over a period of time, as I went deeper into the subject, I realized that there were so many elements of our day-to-day experiences where there was lack of acceptance for who we are. And I faced that personally too. So, if in case I'm very authentic in terms of, that's what the word I would use, authentic, to share exactly what I feel and bring my whole self, I don't know whether there was enough acceptance for that. It was called as probably being too vulnerable or too much out there in front of people. If I'm passionate in terms of what I want to share, it's looked at times as being too emotional. If I am very empathetic towards what I believe, it was felt that, I'm carrying what my emotions are on my sleeves and walking everywhere. So the acceptance for just the personality that I was and including my gender made me realize that this was a work that required me to get in deeper. So much so that I decided to step out of corporate and be on my own and work directly with organizations to make a difference through inclusion. But I know very well that when we speak about LGBTQ IA plus, at that point in time when we were talking a lot about this, and in the last 4 years, there's been a lot of understanding and awareness. It's still a long way to go. I didn't know what I could do. I was thinking, as a cisgender heterosexual woman, I was wondering, what am I going to do? How am I going to be here and support? And a very dear friend of mine, coincidentally around that time, came out to me and he told me that he's gay. And he also told me about how he was harassed in one of the public restrooms. And I remember I felt almost helpless because there was this thing in my head that I'm doing work in inclusion, but what can I do here? Sometime later, another dear friend of mine told me about how he's going to move countries because there's no acceptance for him and his partner here. So when Rumi mentioned about privilege, at that moment, I realized the privilege. And that privilege made me feel guilty and then moved me into taking action. And that's my journey. That's why I'm here today, because I think even if, for those who were there for the first webinar, you would have heard the panelists speak about how there is a need for sensitization, there's a need for action. And I think that is the space where I've been in, and that's where I want to continue to be in. And so that's me. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Deepa. And your, story just reinforces, what all of us said, Rainmaker, why we always believe that Deepa's, a really powerful motivational coach and trainer because of the life experiences you share and how you share it. So thank you so much. And really looking forward to this substantive discussion today with you, Rumi, and of course our third panelist who I'm yet to introduce, Zainab Patel. Zainab, welcome. Delighted to have you on our panel. Zainab Patel actually needs no introduction. However, I'm going to attempt one. Born in Mumbai, Zainab is a transgender person and is one of the petitioners in the National Legal Services Authority versus Union of India case on transgender rights, also known as the NALSA case. She currently works with Pernod Ricard India as the lead inclusion diversity. Prior to this, she worked with KPMG as the director, diversity and inclusion. She holds an MBA in HR and was a national manager, health and human rights at UNDP's country office in India, and was a regional policy analyst on human rights in Asia. Her areas of interest are health and social development issues, and she comes with over 20 years of national and international work experience. She currently also serves as Western India's representative in the National Council for Transgender Persons and is Kamal Nayan Bajaj Aspen Global Fellow. While Zainab has shared her story and journey at multiple forums, Zainab, we would be most grateful if you could briefly share your journey with us for the benefit of our participants. Welcome, and look forward to sort of really stimulating discussion today with you on our panel. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Anthony, for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon. And thank you all for making time on a busy weekday post-lunch to join us to listen to our own stories and to see how we can create a much more inclusive space for us all. As very kindly introduced by Anthony, my name is Zainab Patel. I'm a transgender woman. I also very proudly belong to the Hijra community, a socio-economic cultural group in India, one of the ethnic transgender groups, if I may call that so. I have a very simple story. I was born in a very, very economically modest family in Mumbai. My parents are from Mangalore, and I was born to a set of Catholic parents. In my own journey, as I grew up, I realized that, one's own journey on gender identity and expression may start young for certain people, and for certain people, it grows as you go on. I unfortunately did not have the necessary support that one would look like in terms of growing up, because I came from a very Orthodox Catholic family, and that meant that anything that was not prescribed by the church was looked down upon. So a variant in terms of identifying, a variant in terms of expressing yourself, because I also had two elder sisters, was looked down not only in the sense of a cultural, social manner, but in terms of what the church teaches you as a teaching, in terms of saying that this is deviance from what would probably be in your lifestyle, etc. And that made me extremely suicidal and open to abuse. I was sexually abused as a kid from within the family. I was sexually abused in school. And that led me to be very suicidal, one, in school. And I attempted at multiple occasions self-harm. One particular incident ended me being in the hospital for a very long time. And once I came out of that, I realized that, there's probably something more in life than, to hurt yourself. And that began my journey of acceptance. As I grew up, I realized that the world is not bad. You feel I'm not the only trans person. I'm not alone. There are many people on the streets like me, who walk like me, who look like me, who talk like me. In a sense that there is community, although there was very few things that connected to us together as a community. And that started my own journey of trying to understand. I had a very selfish purpose. when I started community work. I wanted to uplift people like me and myself in the process. So my journey of community activism did not stem in from philanthropy or wanting to do good. It was wanting to save us and people like me. So if they were my friends, great. If they were people who wanted to see me as their daughter, as their friend, as their sister, great. I did not see this as community work. I just saw this as helping myself. And now, of course, after so many years, we realize, oh, that's what activism is all about. This led to me dropping out of college multiple times, but struggled to complete my graduation and then my post graduation. Went on to take a job with the UN. Um, Interestingly, when we start looking at gender journeys within each of our lives, we realize that we so often tend to rush and stereotype people into a particular role or an identity, which we think, okay, so Nalsa judgment, yes, great. I mean, I was part of a historic judgment, and it was great to be part of something when there were no rights or seemingly negligible rights to be able to go to court and get them confirmed. I think that was absolutely wonderful. But I also happen to have a partner, my husband. I take his name and surname, and my name is Zainab Javed Patel. Javed Patel is my husband's name. So while India was still battling with homosexuality in 2015, I was already married in 2016 in South Africa. We had a civil union. So, I mean, in that sense, I feel very privileged to be part of a system that allowed me to go to another country, get married, experience what it means to be in a registered relationship of sorts. Came back to India, started working on corporate inclusion. And here I am today, working with you towards something which we all believe in and we all aspire, and also trying to break some of the stereotypes along the way. And stereotypes are not something which is driven by people external to our community. I think I really like what Rumi said in terms of breaking our own stereotypes, because all of us who have a brain have a bias, and each of us, whether with our privileges or whether to the difficulties, we have a way of thinking, we have a way of reacting, we have a way of sustaining ourselves, and I think that is what makes us individualistic. So I guess that is going to be the gist of what I'm also going to be sharing with you over the next 1 hour or so in terms of understanding what it means to be in this journey of inclusion.
Zainab, thank you so much. To be honest, while I've heard your journey at multiple, I think it's there on the internet. But nevertheless, every time I hear it, it never fails to kind of bring a lump to my throat from the perspective of how hard the journey has been for you. And one of the objectives that we want to achieve through webinars like this is really to hopefully make a dent in the universe, so to speak. If we can have greater awareness, or if our greater awareness can come about even for a fraction of the population on this planet, I think we would consider at least our job as having been done from that perspective. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. And I'll sort of without further ado get right to it. So we our panel discussion really is focused on, this is the second part, and we're continuing our focus on the Navtej Johar judgment, although part one dealt with the sort of the more legal and academic discussion pertaining to the actual judgment. But one of the things that we at Rainmaker have often discussed, amongst all of us is shouldn't we Indians be celebrating September as the equivalent of Pride Month? Given that Navtej Johar was passed, the judgment was passed on September 6th, and we have more, it relates more to us than let's say June, which is worldwide now it is seen as Pride Month, but it's really something to do with something that happened in the US and a set of riots, which of course kicked into motion a series of events, which ultimately culminated in sort of greater rights for the LGBTQ plus community. But that said, isn't the Navteej Johar judgment more relevant to us? Shouldn't we be looking at September as the equivalent of Pride Month in India? And maybe to take us even a step back to ask each of you, what does pride mean to you, right? Because I think from all of the conversations I've had with different individuals, I realize that it means different things to different people, right? So I know I've thrown a lot out there. I'm just going to pause for a second and maybe let you all respond to that. Maybe we could start in reverse this time, Zainab. If you could share your thoughts with us, and then we can take it from there.
Sure, Anthony. So while I'm sure a lot of people know about pride and know about the solution, I'm going to take some time to just to sit and reflect back upon why is pride observed, celebrated, remembered globally. I think the very fact that pride started off as a protest. It started off as a protest against the law enforcement agency. And I don't know if you all remember or have read about this. Let me set the context for you all. We on television, in the newspapers, on the internet, we often read about raids at disco parties, women and men being beaten up, police coming undercover. We see that in the movies and we say, okay, now we know exactly what's going to happen the next day. And there's a flashback to when the Stonewall riots happened. In this small underground LGBT meeting space, if I may say so, sexual and social people met each other, people dated each other, people found partners. And the police sends an undercover cop inside. And remember, that time there are no mobile phones. All of them work on a payphone. So this person is undercover cop in civilian clothes, walks inside, confirms that what is happening inside is that you have people of different sexualities and gender expression here, or some of them drinking, some of them making out, or whatever. And this person goes and uses the payphone inside to alert the police outside, yes, come up. And suddenly the police barges in. And this is not a movie scene, this is something that happened real. They barge in, they start filing people according to their gender. So men and women. They started checking people out. They started feeling people up. So they saw people expressing themselves. Women, they tried to further segregate, abuse. And that actually triggered a whole range of protest against the legal system, against the law enforcement system. There were riots. There was actually a riot. People throwing stones, people, something similar to what we see on TV today. And I think that really gave an effort to push back against a system that was repressive, push back against a system that was fine combing people out, putting them into jackets, etc. And look at what we see on the streets today, whether virtually or in person. We see a riot of colors. We see people expressing themselves, not something in which they would do on a day-to-day basis, but just in terms of how they would like to be also seen as. So you see people in everyday clothing, you see people wearing them up. Some people, fantasize in terms of the color schemes that they use, the imagery, the props that they use. No one wears those props and goes to office and comes out of a house like that. But the fact that it talks about a whole diverse spectrum of it. Today, and I think June was symbolic because we looked at that. We aped an idea from the West. Then let's take June as Pride Month. Of course, when you look at the Indian subcontext, you see many, many legal victories which were won by people. They did not come because the government decided. It was people's journeys and victories. And you see this thing that happened in September last week, 4 years ago. And, I want to actually, read out what was actually said by Justice Chandrachud, who was one of the authors and hopefully become the next Chief Justice of India. And he says that, 158 years ago, a colonial legislature made it criminal even for consenting adults of the same gender to find fulfillment in love. The law deprived them of the simple right as human beings to live, love, and partner as nature made. The human instinct to love was caged by constraining the physical manifestation of their sexuality. What a powerful line this is. I get goosebumps when I read that line. I mean, to say that someone so beautifully, it's not about getting into bed or making out, it's about the physical manifestation of their love. And if you see this thing today, of course, it all depends upon us, what we want to do. You can have pride every month. Why not have a pride in April? Because that's when the Nalsa judgment happened. And if you see the heavy reliance of the Navte Johar judgment based on some of the underlying observation and the commentary in the order, we have used that. We've used the Yogya Karta principles in that. You can celebrate that. I mean to say, you can talk about the Puttaswamy judgment, the Hadia case, the Sabrimala judgment, all of them very sensuously articulating the autonomy of the person over public morality versus, constitutional morality. I think all of these together, it depends upon us what we decide to claim as space. Why does, for me, I always have this problem about why Pride in June. And today I say, why not Pride 12 months of the year? Because I am tired of corporates and those in this space of branding, painting a pink month in June and remaining the 11 months to let people run back to where they came from, back to a world of bigotry and homophobia and transphobia, do everything and come and get their sins washed in June. So I said, use this opportunity to kind of say that, it's great to have a Pride month in June, but nothing stops you from having a Pride month in September, in December, in April as well. That's my limited viewpoint on this topic.
No, agreed, Zainab. I think you make very powerful points. In fact, the concept really should be to kind of, the ideal world would be one where there is all of these phobias don't exist any longer. But until we get there, I guess, celebrating it either June, September, April, whenever, are all ways in which we can constantly sensitize the world at large that much more needs to be done. So, but fair points. I think pride as a concept needs to now be instilled rather than pride, which is celebrated at a particular time of the year. I think mentally and conceptually, people need to sort of get their heads around it. And then, there's a lot of people who've said, the virtue signaling that happens in June, right? And then everybody, like you rightly said, goes back to where to the world that they originally came from, full of different types of phobias, homophobia, transphobia, etc. Anyway, so thank you for that. Deepa, you're a trainer. I mean, you've probably seen a lot of this as well. There's a lot that happens in June, and then I think the world just forgets the LGBTQ plus community, and then we go back to where it originally was. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, in terms of an update, Johar judgment, where we are today, what more can we do?
Yeah, no, I think Zainab has shared most and almost everything of what it is, and I couldn't agree more with what she said. But I've spent all my life in corporate, and yes, I can give a perspective on what I see and what I've been observing over a period of time there. And like I said, when I started work in the space of DEI, like a long time back, I don't think anybody had any idea about LGBTQI+. LGBT, and of course we've added and to better understand, but nobody had any visibility, and myself included at that point in time. I'm going to be very honest about that. Even when I stepped out of corporate and I started and I said I want to do work in this space and I want to really, build an understanding, we never spoke about LGBTQI+. I've seen a big shift taking place over the last 4 years. And yes, of course, that's exactly the time that we had Section 377 decriminalized. And there have been, so many people who worked tirelessly to bring to fore the reality of what Zainab has shared and what Rumi's been sharing as well. When I look at, I'm seeing at least that one, I couldn't agree more to the fact that we can't have just 1 month. I'm completely there on that. But I'm saying at least everybody's taking a step somewhere. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I remember at one point in time I was thinking I got quite frustrated with this work that I'm doing. And I said that I'm speaking to people, talking to everybody. I don't know where this shifting is. Everything just a tick mark. And I remember one person coming up and asking me that, do you feel sometimes when you speak to people, is one person getting shifting? And I said, definitely, one, two, quite a few are shifting. Can you take that on as what you want to work with and move forward? So when I look at this again from the June month perspective, I know that there are some people who are shifting. And I couldn't agree more that we can't stop at just June. It's like saying that, one day we celebrate for one particular activity and that's it. We cannot stop with that. But that month, there is one shift happening with one person. There is one movement happening somewhere. And it has to continue for the rest. And I also think that, there has to be this deeper understanding to take it forward through the year. No doubt about that. But even one shift is a good shift. And I'm seeing everybody coming together. I just hope it's a lot more than tick mark. That's a bit.
Every drop makes the ocean, I think, Deepa. So everything that we do somewhere along the way leaves a mark and takes us probably a few steps forward rather than not. So from that perspective, yes, you're absolutely right that whether it's June or whether it's September, as long as we keep doing something, taking the movement forward, I think that works. Fair enough. Rumi, your thoughts, and in particular, I would love to hear your thoughts, in terms of how your generation views it. The reason I ask is also because amongst the younger generation is Navteej Johar commonly spoken about? Do people know about it? Is there much awareness or not? Of course, would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, first of all, Deepa and Zainab ji has already covered a lot of things. I come from a very youngster point of view, so I'll be just sharing that. I think, we need to understand what these months stand for. These months are basically a reminder to do things and not just to celebrate in a sense. It started with the riots and, it started with the revolution. It started with the sad thing. But we came to a point where we are celebrating it. I think that's great to celebrate human beings and their identities, but also to understand that it started from revolution and it needs to be a revolution today also. The entire Stonewall thing and all of it is a reminder that we don't have safe spaces yet for LGBT people. Even in our generation, right, we talk about how the generation is changing, it's becoming more inclusive. Unfortunately, because of the people who were before me, I have got a space to be myself, and that wouldn't have been possible if they were not there. Definitely, but we are still in a time where awareness is not there. I recently started working with corporates, and before that I was still studying. I was still working offline and stuff like that, and I realized that Section 377 did not change a lot for me or for the area that I was working in. I still faced a lot of discrimination outside, even when I was traveling, even when I was in my college. After Section 377, I was in my master's in psychology. I had to drop out because it became too difficult for me as a queer person to not have inclusive washrooms, to constantly be, pointed out that I was actually, an assigned female at birth and I didn't, deserve to go to a female washroom and all of that. I think these are daily life struggles that a queer person goes through, and I still come from a lot of privilege, remembering that, right? So for people who don't have this privilege, I wonder what they go through. So I think for me, it's to remember the essence, to do things, to go forward. It's not just celebrating, but to also add on to the things that we are doing. I don't come from a law background, so I might not understand that, but what I feel is when a law comes in, what I've realized is its essence is not realized by the citizens of our country. Section 377 came in, a lot of good trans laws, bad trans laws came in, right? But even after that, the people are still not that aware. What I think is we are moving towards a point where we have more inclusive trans laws, we'll have adoption rights, marriage rights, and all of that. But I wonder if the country is ready for such inclusive and good laws. I think the awareness is also important, so that with the law, even citizens are changing and we are understanding each other. I think that is where I come from. I think we also have Pride months in different cities. I think that's beautiful. That's Mumbai has a different Pride month, Gujarat has a different Pride month. I think even that is great. And like Deepa ji said, I think I totally agree with it. Like that June actually kickstarts a lot of conversations, and I've seen that it does it does seep through to a lot of people. A lot of companies realize that they have to do induction every time a person enters a company and all of that. So I think June makes them think, makes them understand that these things are important. So yeah, that's from me.
Thank you, Rumi. You've sort of summed up a lot of what we have discussed in very eloquently, and it's refreshing to hear from so you're the generation that's going to sort of take this forward, right, and take the movement forward. Also, you're the newer generation. I mean, so my sense is that very anecdotally, without data, that the younger generation is a lot more open, inclusive than probably my generation. So refreshing to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're just going to run a quick poll. We have a couple of polls that we have kept ready, more as just to get a sense of the room, and if there are any startling revelations from that, we can discuss it. Otherwise, we can move to the next question. So team, Rainmaker team, do we have the poll ready? If it's ready, you can go ahead with it now. Otherwise, we can. Okay, it's ready. So the poll question, it'll stay on your screen for about 60 seconds. Do you personally know a member from the LGBTQ plus community? So I think the polls ended. Broadly, I think roughly you could say 70% of those on this call have answered in the affirmative, yes, that they do personally know somebody from the LGBTQ community, and about 30% have said no. Is that surprising? I'd particularly be interested in hearing Rumi and Zainab's perspective on this. Is it because how does it happen that would you have expected that to be more or less, or love to hear your thoughts. Zainab, would you like to go first?
So Anthony, I think this is a fair representation of people who are on this call, and it also talks about the 30-odd% who do not. So, I mean, with the 68%, no surprises. You're here because you want to also look about and learn about inclusion. But the 30-odd% who do not personally know of the LGBTIQ community, this is an absolutely great number. And I think thank you for all of you who've been able to, look at this session as one way of, coming to know. So now for people who you probably didn't know as LGBT, so now two personally would know by the end of the session, two LGBTIQ community members who are sharing their life stories and realities with you.
Yep, I couldn't agree more with you, Zainab. Rumi?
I think I agree with Zainab.
That number.
Zainab, that it is in fact a good number, and by the end of the day, they'll know two people. I think with time, people are coming out. I think maybe you have a queer person around you, around you in your company or as a friend, but maybe they haven't come out to you. Maybe even that's a perspective that you can think about. When we have such conversations, maybe someday or the other, a friend might just come out to you and say, okay, I'm queer. Maybe that is a space that you can create around you so that more people come out.
Wonderful. Yes, I think that maybe someday then that 30% will come down to zero, because everybody will know. I mean, and I know, while we don't have any hard stats on this, I think there are numbers out there that say that between 5 to 10% of our total population are queer. So logically, you should know somebody who is, provided of course they are out. But fair enough. Deepa, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I'm actually quite happy to see the numbers this way, because I remember a couple of times last year, the year before that, when I ran this particular question, I didn't get this kind of response. And I said, if you're getting there, getting there.
Super. Okay, so moving on. What we are, the next question that we really want to kind of discuss is really, why are companies today struggling to sort of with diversity progression at the workplace, right? I mean, are they really? Is it a lack of awareness, or I mean, personally, my experience has been that organizations that are headquartered maybe in the West, Europe, or in the United States, they take DE&I a lot more seriously than maybe Indian companies. Again, it's a statement that I make anecdotally without data, so I am happy to stand corrected if any of you feel otherwise. But it's from our experience of having spoken to organizations when we have asked them whether DEI is a priority for them, and for many Indian organizations, not yet. I think it's not yet come up on the list of to-dos. But for a lot of multinationals, either they have already sort of done a lot of work in that space, primarily coming from their headquarters, and or they want to start their journey in India. So is that your experience as well? Maybe Deepa, we can start with you, because you've been a trainer. You've sort of worked with a lot of wide spectrum of organizations, right? And you've seen how they have sort of reacted to your training, to a lot of what you do with respect to unconscious bias. What's your take on this?
So this is where I think the corporates have started. Like, this is probably coming from the previous question that you had also, in terms of where are we doing it? I mean, is it only about June, or is it about really internalizing our learning? So, I mean, and I guess you're talking about the broader DEI piece of it, but I'm just going to kind of stay with this. So there is work that is happening, but I think what we need to look at and realize is that ultimately everything has a very structural heterosexuality attached to it. And while we have Article 15, which very clearly talks about, the fact that there should be non-discrimination, and we have equal opportunity policies in every organization, which says that we need to give equal opportunity policy. This is coming back to my point on how much are we doing it as something that we need to do versus something that we need to internalize. And this is where I remember when I was starting off this work on my own, I had said that, I just want to do work so that people can bring their whole selves and be who they are. And I was met with a lot of, questions that, yeah, but what about the impact in terms of the profits for the organization? What about the attachment to KPIs? I'm not saying no or anything to them, but I really don't want to get into that piece of it right now, because my very honest belief is that this is actually a work of humanity. We are talking about human related work here. And if you immediately attach everything to what is it that is happening in the KPI, what's it happening, and that's the only way we're going to measure it, then that is only where it will stay. This is my honest feeling. So I have got an equal employment opportunity policy done. I am a company that is doing work in the month of June and in the month of September, maybe done. Or am I willing to have some of those difficult conversations and willing to break and chip into this heterosexuality that exists everywhere? Then that is where the difference. And I don't know whether that level of humanity related conversation everybody is willing to have right now. So, like, for example, I know one of the things that I've always said is that, are we willing to go forward and even try to read up a little bit on aspects which you're not aware of? Or are we blissfully happy staying in the state of denial or defending my already aware point of view? I mean, that's where I think that, we need to bring about a shift. Are we willing to read? Are we willing to have conversations? Are we willing to listen to stories? Are we willing to be okay to share our point of view, ask questions? And I don't think we are going there. I feel that probably there's a long way to go in terms of going a little deeper. So coming to also the point that you said, yes, there are organizations in the West who are very, it's very deeply rooted that we need to do work in this space. And I think there is that effort in terms of conversations that's happening. I think we have a distance to cover. I think we have a very, very long distance to cover. Over the last 4 years, the fact that we are talking about it, the fact that, I know Zainab, Parmesh, Harish, I mean, the kind of work that has gone, and I have been there in the shadows, but I've been watching the kind of work that's been happening and contributing in my own small way. But are we going deeper to be willing to ask those questions, willing to be curious enough with respect to understand? I'm not so sure whether we are really there yet, but I'm hopeful.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. That we're making progress, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and the awareness is going to take a while before we just need to keep plugging away, I guess. Zainab, you worked at KPMG, now at Pernod Ricard. I mean, both MNCs, and you've do you believe that there is a difference in the way organizations approach DEI, particularly with respect to the LGBTQ plus community? If they are, an MNC sort of anchored in Europe or in the US versus a homebred Indian organization, do you see a difference, or is it more about the culture of a particular organization that sort of determines how they approach this?
So, Anthony, I've worked with two very different organizations. One, which is in the consulting professional services space, BFSI, if I may call it, to, a little bit of a stretch. And then the other is just manufacturing in the FMCG space. Both of them have very, very radically contrasting trends and very different mindsets and very different industry and clients which they serve. But I think the common point that I see in both, and I've been fortunate, touch wood, to be part of these two organizations who truly believed in making inclusive organizations. Now, let's talk a little bit about the consulting world in general. See, the consulting world offers services and products to our clients, which could be in this case Rainmaker, which could be in the case of many other organizations, not that my current organization, Pernod. We offer chartered accountant related services, taxation, audits, management consulting, risk management, so on and so forth. Now, in order to make ourselves compliant to larger requests for proposals, a lot of organizations today who ask for these requests for proposal do factor in a bit about what is your organization doing to further the inclusion, diversity, and equity. I think not only in terms of ticking the box, do you have an equal opportunity policy? Do you have a strategy? But what is the kind of representation? Do you have supplier diversity in space? What is the kind of quantum that you're talking about? So one, at least for people in the consulting space, it makes perfect business sense because it only accentuates your own applications and puts you as a market for thinker. The second thing, let me talk about my organization currently, Pernod Ricard, which is in the alcohol space. Now, there is no alcohol, which is pink alcohol or something like that, which only gay men or lesbian women or trans people drink. Alcohol is alcohol. Everyone drinks alcohol who enjoys it. So you don't have a particular drink where you go. But what does happen is when you start investing in making your brand inclusive, to an extent, it leaves back an impression upon certain thinkers within the buying community. Yes, I would like to associate myself or take up a brand which is inclusive. I'm saying this with a word of caution because ultimately it's a buyer's decision. It also has an implication about what you have in your pocket. versus what you really think inclusion will come to you at a cost of. But it does create good business sense to be inclusive, because today, even within larger markets, you tend to factor in where is the niche market within the market? Where do I kind of create a pipeline? So branding does help. Now let me talk about the workforce. My own organization, Pernorica, is making sizable investments. We are a very small organization, which is about 1,500 people. It's very small in terms of absolute numbers. But in the last few months, there has been very, very conscious effort to go ahead and recruit people from diverse communities. We did this with women. So a lot of the Band C and Band D leadership is coming from women. So our CHRO, the head of legal, the head of corporate affairs, the head of INT, the head of innovations, all are exemplary women who come and join in the workforce within 6 months. And for me to think about even doing something like that is pathbreaking. To put women in positions that are decisive, which can create visibility. I think the same thing is what needs to be done next for persons with disability and LGBTIQ. And it takes exemplary amount of investment if you want to get the right kind of people in. See, the job market is growing, the talent market is growing. Where we were 5 years ago is not what the current situation. We have LGBTIQ persons, we have persons with disability learning and delivering on Python, for example. Or we have queer lawyers, or we have persons with disability who are engineers. So the talent pool is increasing by the day. The most sensible ones are the organizations who are willing to take this leap of faith, go to the market of these talent firsthand, so that they set a higher benchmark for themselves within the larger MNC firm, and also to tell the market, hey, we've done this much before you can even think of it. And I guess this trend is really catching upon by certain segments of the industry, not all. I think that also kind of goes to say that how many organizations, apart from doing the mandatory pride walks and the pride arches and the sensitization programs and the panel discussion and the rainbow cupcake, actually go and hire LGBT people in the month of Pride? We at least see that to a certain extent with women around International Women's Day. There are hiring drive. I don't know. I mean to say, I don't want to be the eternal pessimist, but I'm saying that, do we have multiple job fairs inviting LGBT people to come and join them? Do we have drives that say that we are this month, instead of doing Pride in the Way, let me go and invest in getting people on board? And the rest of the workforce is something I'm going to be working with in the remaining 12 months of the year. But let me focus on getting a diverse workforce. And whatever reasonable accommodation is needed, I will use this month to drive it, because there is international and national attention to the cause. And if you find organizations doing that, great. My organization hired 2 gay men during this period. One is my own IT manager, the other one is in a sales team. No openly gay people joining our team. So I mean to say, and this is
in the month of June itself. In the month of June itself.
Yes, in the month of June.
Wonderful.
So I'm saying,
sorry, you were saying.
Use power, use your leadership, use your edge in this month to do something exemplar. Don't do everything what the world does. I mean, yes, fine, you can do a rainbow cake and you can do everything. No offense in that. But move beyond that.
No, if I
so do more, really. Yeah, Deepa, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add, I think what Zainab said was very powerful also, because I remember one of the things that I was working with one of the corporates, and when we were talking about, just to add to what Zainab said, we were talking about hiring and really going all out there and hiring for the LGBT community. One of the points that came back very strongly by one of the members of the community in the organization, and probably the only one who had come out of the company, was that, are we walking the talk? Because the community is so closely knit that if we are not going to speak up and show that we really care, this hiring drive that you're going to go and do is not going to yield anything. And even if it yields, it's not going to sustain. So you're going with to add to that piece, what Zainab said is that I'm going with an intent to bring in people. Is somebody going to join in? Because what you're speaking, what you're advocating, what you're actioning is also going to be heard and going to be watched. So I think it's a combination of that. One needs to be aware that it's not just about getting in the number, but it's also to know that am I creating a space and I'm sustaining a space where, people can thrive. Yeah, so just thought I could add that piece as well. Yeah.
Oh, no, of course, totally. And I think really that is where we are and should be heading. I agree with Zainab. The cakes and all of that, the rainbow colors, yes, great. But I think people sort of then, if you can do something substantive in that month, um, that would obviously be far more impactful than all of the social media posts suddenly turning rainbow. I think, of course, there is a value, there's a benefit to it. It continues to create awareness, but something substantive needs to be done. Rumi, just wanted to rephrase this a little bit for you. Amongst your peer groups, friends, etc., uh, does it matter that you were to work for an organization or a company that it was a company that branded itself as LGBTQ plus friendly and all of that? Does it really matter to all of you, or when you're looking for a job, those things don't really matter? Would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So I think one thing about the generation is we see ourselves as aware. So we know what policies are. We know what's important, what to see before you even apply. So for me, when I apply for a job, right, I would ask the interviewees whatever the policies that they have. If they don't, I would not care to even apply to that company. So the generate aware, that is one thing that we need to understand. And for people who also understand diversity, right, so the generation would understand if you are just doing it for the tick mark or just for the label, or you're doing it genuinely because diversity is a very broad topic. Before Section 377, diversity was just women. Diversity was just assigned females at birth. Right. After Section 377, when, it became the talk, a lot of people started talking about LGBT then. There are companies who do not recognize disabled people, right? Disability is not a part of inclusion for a lot of companies, right? So I think that is very important, and the generation is aware. The generation reads policies, the generation reads laws and whatever. Even if they don't have a law background, we read about it, right? And I think a lot of this generation is involved a lot with whatever is going on around the world. So uh, you know, so even comparing what we have right here in our country to what Westerners have, right? We know what it is. We know what we can get, right? So it's always better to prepare for companies, to be prepared for the next generation and to be prepared for inclusion. I think that's there, and the entire perspective of it being profitable. I think that's absolutely beautiful to also talk about it, and not be limited understanding of diversity. I think that's about it. Yes, it matters a lot to this generation, and I think companies need to keep up. That's what I feel.
Glad to hear that. And I think once more and more of your generation, votes with their feet and decides to join organizations that are genuinely inclusive, I think you can actually start to see real change, not just the sort of peripheral change or cosmetic change, but real substantive change. Okay, good. So before we kind of move on to our last discussion point, we'll just run a second poll just to see what everybody has to say on that topic. So I'm just going to request my team to put that up. Okay, there you go. Poll question number 2. Have you seen discrimination at your workplace against the LGBTQ plus community? So have you actually seen discrimination or people behaving in a discriminatory fashion, bullying? All of that, I guess, would sort of come within the ambit of this question? The options are always, sometimes, never. The results are 11% have answered always, which means they have seen discrimination. 42% have answered sometimes. So maybe they have, I'm not quite sure what to make of sometimes in this as often, but the occasional joke or snide comment or what have you. I'm not sure. I don't want to interpret that answer yet. And 47% have said never. They have never seen any discrimination at their workplace against the LGBTQ plus community. I want to start with the never answer, which is basically almost 50% of those who have voted have said they've never seen it. Zainab, do you think that's because there isn't adequate representation of the LGBTQ plus community in that workplace, or do you attribute that to any other reason?
Both. I think one is that the LGBTIQ community is also very diverse, very heterogeneous. Not all of them necessarily, quote unquote, look trans or appear homosexual or appear lesbian enough for people. Sorry, I have to say.
Or are even out, right?
Whether they are out or not, I'm trying to say that, there are some people who appear, who seem to appear to people as gay, homosexual, or lesbian, or trans. The rest don't. I'm going to say that visual representation is a major trigger sometimes
Okay.
in terms of for any person who's going through an incident of harassment, violence, or discrimination. How you look, how you dress, how you talk, and how you conduct sometimes becomes a trigger. It's the same kind of thing what happens with women. You dress provocatively. You look like you're inviting people to come and bully you or harass you. Okay, so I'm going to say that there are some people who may be effeminate presenting. There may be some persons who are more masculine presenting, and then there is a whole lot of people who want to break down the norms between feminine and masculinity and appear to be gender non-binary or non-conforming, which is also great. And these kind of become the trigger points for persons. And of course, trans persons, by virtue of them not fitting sometimes within the binary of being male and female, become the ease because it's easier to spot a trans person.
Correct.
in that
Correct.
sense. So I guess it also reflects in a way what we see in society. See, you quoted the Kinsey scale, 5%. But I'm trying to say that even if I stretch it by imagination, not necessarily that if there's an LGBTIQ person at the workplace, you may know of it and the person is subject to harassment. Or it may be your workplace is totally devoid of anyone who's LGBTI. So I think there are 3 take-home lessons. One is that great, you belong to a workspace, or you've been part of work or social spaces where LGBTIQ people are at least tolerated, they are not harassed. I think I would like to believe you're part of that space. The second good thing is that your workspace doesn't have LGBTIQ or identifiable LGBTIQ people, so there is no targeted case, and your lot is still a good lot to work with. The third case is that we need to actually see, hear, and experience better, because when you're talking about sexual harassment at the workplace, so while we talk about mitigation is also zero occurrence and zero tolerance for that. So we need to up our ante, unlearn some things that we have to. So probably calling someone a homo or calling someone a hijra or a chakka is something that we've grown up hearing about and not being sensitive enough to think that, okay, this is not something, or calling someone, oh, that's a butch. I think we also need to untrain, unlearn some of the stuff that we've grown up on to kind of make it a world where we understand and don't have tolerance for that. I think, Deepa, if you'd like to add something from a posh perspective, you work so much on this. So I was just trying to use my own little bit of posh learning to kind of say this is what I would constitute.
No, thanks, no, Zainab, that's right. And there's one more thing I'll just add to what you said, is that there's also this possibility, which I have personally seen, where everything is in place. but there are all those side small group or paired conversations that take place about people, which probably may not be known to everybody else. Therefore, there is this general belief that there is no discrimination. But I have observed how there are those pockets of small group conversations that take place in organization where every move of an individual who's from the LGBT community is spoken about, is judged, is questioned, and it creates an environment which is so toxic for the individual. So if you're not observing discrimination, I'm very, very happy. As I always say, I'm very thrilled. That's the endeavor, that's the work that I think each one of us are trying to bring out there. But sometimes there are those things that happen where it's those microaggressions, like, even the words that we just now spoke about, one word in passing, I just said that and never meant that, but one word in passing, and it's about time we pull up our socks and say, I'm going to take notice of these and bring about a shift, so yeah.
Rumi, you've I think been at the receiving end of a lot of bullying and harassment growing up and so on. So your take, I mean, what do you think? What of the poll, and what in addition to what Zainab and Deepa had to say?
I think my workspace till now has been my college, has been the NGOs that I worked in, and I think I've witnessed bullying in school and college as well. I think something that is really important is when you have such policies in place, making people aware of them. When I was in college, I did not even know that LGBT was even included in the anti-bullying policy there. Right? It was not. And even if it was, I didn't even know what that stood for. Right? So that awareness is really important. Even if you have such policies, I think a lot of people don't feel safe to report it. I as a young person did not feel safe to report my bullying to the stakeholders of the college, because they weren't they weren't inclusive. So I think that could also be a similar situation in corporates, where a lot of people don't feel safe to even report such cases. Secondly, being they are not, I mean, if we don't have such policies, I mean, I've read a little about POSH not being inclusive even for males, assigned males at birth. So I think even if that is the case, people should be made aware of such policies. People should be made aware that they are safe to report, safe to be. I think that is important. That is my take on this. Yeah.
Thank you, Rumi. Okay, so I am mindful that we are sort of very close to the end of our session. So I'm going to, in fact, take, dovetail into a last question from Rumi's point about college and policies. The recent Chennai High Court judgment, the judge had sort of indicated that there is a lot more that needs to be done in terms of creating awareness on possibly including sensitization, awareness about maybe DEI and as a larger ocean, as well as LGBTQ plus community as a part of the curriculum. Right now, that's that's a discussion that we could have for hours and an end, and we would probably not get anywhere. But apart from the fact that yes, it is in the hands of the government that needs to make that change, fair enough, and I don't want to get into the politics of it. But if we had to sort of talk about including that in curriculum, what would be the sort of in each of your opinion, what would be the right way to go about doing it? Because a lot of what was what queer kids face these days, including what Rumi may have faced as well, arise out of the fact that there is virtually no sensitization, right? Kids are simply not aware, and these are the children that grow up to adults that become who they are, with absolutely no understanding of the community and how it works. So what thoughts? I mean, again, leaving aside the politics of it may or may not happen, if we had to include this, how would it be? Like 60 seconds each of you.
Okay, I'll go first and try to be within 60 seconds. I think, Anthony, the biggest thing that I would like to do is that, there will be judgments and there will be superlative judgments and there will be exemplar judgments. The question is that we as a common man should be able to work with stakeholders to convert these wise words into something practical. And don't expect politicians or bureaucrats to come and help you in that. They may be bound by it, there will be a chain, they might go back and forth. I think the real power is with us, and start with your families, because even to get something like basic sexuality education is a challenge because of the roadblocks that politicians have put in terms of getting kids access to quality sex education. So talking about LGBTIQ issues in school is still a very long way off. So I guess you and I, if we equip ourselves with the necessary knowledge, awareness, and tools to talk about it in our own homes, in our families, in our settings, and not limited to a one-off DNI session where we end up feeling good about it and say, yes, what a lovely session it is. I think the task is on each one of us to take this as a mission to at least speak about something what you've learned in this session with 3 to 4 other people. All might not buy in your theory of change, but at least you sparked a conversation and you know that you've already become an ally by action, not necessarily by signing up for the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zainab. Rumi, Deepa?
Yeah, I can go next. I don't know that I'll wrap it in 60 seconds, but I'll give it a shot. No, so I personally feel that there's a long way that we can go, but we can start with the educational institutions. I'm not getting into books and what happens in curriculum, because I couldn't agree more that it's going to take a long time. But we can have conversations. Like I want to state 2 examples. In a school of a friend's kid, when there is a conversation around personality development and they bring about this on LGBTQI+, all the children are squirming as the definition of LGBTQIA is explained, while my friend's daughter is wondering why is it that this is the response that is coming around it, because that is normalized in the home, the conversation, the understanding. My daughter, when she was about 6 years old, I bought her a book which was called as Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. And she was very engrossed in them. And then one day I asked her, so which story is calling out to you? And she told me the story that's staying with me is that of a boy named Coy Matthias, actually a girl named Coy Matthias, Mama. And, I said, what's it? And she said that, he was born a boy, but he always knew that he felt, and he knew and he felt that he was a girl. And so today she is accepted everywhere as a girl. That allowed me to start a conversation with her. So coming to this, one question which was asked to me very often in the space of DEI is, when do we begin teaching our children? Well, when do we begin teaching our children how to eat, what are the values, how to pray, how to communicate with the family? Well, that is the time that you begin. There's no one fine day that you're going to do something very radical. Bring it as a part of a conversation. So that's where the education begins, at our home, in our society, in our vicinity.
Wonderful, wise words, Deepa. Definitely, I think every parent who's on this should take note. And I think, yeah, you're right. Those conversations need to start very early on in life, rather than don't leave it for later, because most parents don't want to have awkward conversations with their children. They probably, if they had a choice, they would never have it, because somewhere the kid will figure it out. But obviously that doesn't work. Rumi, your thoughts?
I would just be adding to what the 2 panelists said. I think we have this entire discussion about whether the children will understand or not. I think it's much better to work with children than adults. That is something that I have realized myself, that with adults, you have to work with their entire notion of sexuality, their cultural aspect and all of that. When you work with children, it's all about love. You tell them that a girl can love a girl, the boy can love a boy, and they understand it. You don't even have to go beyond that. That is something that we need to acknowledge. And, you talked about how we should educate kids so that they are aware and they don't grow up to be bullies. I think we also need to educate the teachers then, because teachers sometimes are also bullies too. We label children problem children when they are facing a genuine difficulty of dyslexia or ADHD, right? So I think making teachers sensitive, more aware is as important as making children aware so that they don't grow up to be bullies. What I've realized is the stakeholders need to take that effort, be courageous enough to have this conversation with the parents too, because then that becomes a hassle where parents don't want to be part of it and all of that. I think they need to be strong enough to say nahi ye karna hai, we need to do this in a school, and just go ahead with it. That's what I feel about it. And I've noticed that schools which are under an NGO or which are still developing do the sensitization because the NGOs understand that this is important, and good reputable schools don't do it because they have this bias about talking about LGBT. So we need to understand and view our privileges and see if we are doing anything with that. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rumi. So we had an, but in light of the fact that I wanted to also take a couple of questions, I'm going to skip the poll and move to the questions so that at least we have a chance to hear from people, and they have questions that, if possible, yeah, Zainab, I know you need to drop off, so feel free to sort of jump off whenever you need to. Thank you so much. But see if you can sort of help us with a couple of questions until you can stay on. There are a couple of questions. One is for Rumi. How will you explain they them to a lay person who is unaware of LGBT? Question for Rumi from the participants. And one, before Zainab leaves, maybe I'd like your view, Zainab, on this, and we can actually move to Rumi after that. Today's news says Harvard students will be punished for not using their preferred pronouns. Is this fair? Is the question from the audience. So Zainab, your views, then we can move to Rumi and Deepa, and then Rumi will come back to you for the question that's directly addressed to you.
See, first of all, I have problems when it comes to people saying that this is my preferred name and pronoun. I think when one puts their name, so I might be named as, lack of better word, let me use my dead name, Ernest Narona. But if I in my signature put my name as Zainab and put my pronouns as she and her, it is my name and this is my pronoun. There is no such thing as preference. Preference means that you prefer one over the other. I think one needs to look at autonomy over here, because when I say that my name is Zainab, and I'm going to use the words of the Puthuswami judgment, which says that the right to privacy also is fundamental when it comes to the right to be left alone with my choice. So here is not a preference that I have X, but I want Y. The question is, I want Y. And that's how I identify. Regarding Harvard putting it into its list of penalties, I don't offer an opinion on that. I've neither studied in Harvard nor do I wish to consider studying in Harvard. But yes, I feel that penalizing someone by trying to create uniformity has never worked. It's the exactly same but opposite way of saying that I will only dress people in the binary and anything apart from that is not accepted. So for me, one takes it a slightly, one starts penalizing the choice to make an identity and to reveal it to people, that's excess. So I would say that I do not know the context, I do not know the situation as what's that prompted, but I would say anything that tries to put too much uniformity in our approach tends to then kind of create a similar looking wall, and that's the antithesis of inclusion, diversity, and equity. Thank you.
Agreed, Zainab. And thank you so much. I just want to thank you. I know you're going to leave very shortly. So thank you so much for being on this panel and sharing your life experiences, your journey, and your insights. Absolutely delightful. And I'm hoping that this recording that we put out there for everybody, they'll sort of all benefit from your insights as well. So thanks so much for joining us today. Rumi and Deepa, your thoughts on this particular question, and then Rumi, we can move to the question that was specifically addressed to you.
Right, should I go ahead then? I think very beautifully mentioned by Zainab already. But I think one thing I would like to take as a word that she mentioned there was that of choice. You asked a question at the start, right, Anthony? Like, what does pride mean to you? So, pride is actually about embracing who we are. And when I identify myself out of my choice. And if it's something that's imposed from the outside, it's not an inclusion, even if it's in the name of inclusion. So the space that is going to be created for me to bring that part of me at my choice, I would say that that's when I really am truly inclusive and I can feel belonged. I'm not so sure whether, yeah, I would want to go with what is coming up here. Thank you.
Rumi, what about you?
I think it comes back to the entire idea. Na? When we talk about children, if we tell them to not do anything, they will definitely do it.
Yeah.
So I think just pressurizing anybody into such a thing wouldn't have the result that we want. It's the right intention that we want, right? So making people understand why it's important to use the right pronouns and then just go ahead with it. So if it's not coming from the heart, right, I won't want it. I won't want your inclusion just because it is supposed to be that. I want it to come from the heart, right? So I think that's my answer to that. And coming back to the they them question, we have been using they them our entire lives in one way or the other, just that it feels different to use it for one person. When we don't know a person, right? When we don't know a person's gender, we use they. I hope they are comfortable with watching a movie, or they like pizza, and we use it for one person. So not that it is weird. We have been using this, just that the idea to use it for one person does not fit in well for us. I understand that it becomes difficult, but I think the effort really, really matters. And whenever we use they, always use it with are, however we use it, right? And if you are an Indian, you might know the North may we use hum, which is a gender neutral version of they and them, and in Hindi, in fact. So a lot of languages do have these neutral terms. English always had it, just that we didn't use it earlier, and it is recognized as a singular they. If that's your concern, it is recognized as a singular they. So just making them understand that that is their identity, that is how you use it, and try your best to use it. Just that.
Thank you, Rumi. We have another question for you. It's easy to answer. And I think I've already asked you this, but I think somebody from the audience wants to know, how is MX pronounced?
So it is MX, it's not mix. If you say mix, it's actually just diluting the essence of what we want to say. If you say mix, it means that I'm a mix of two genders, but that's not how it is. It's just MX room. So yeah. And it's a gender neutral prefix, like we use MS and MR, Mr. and Mrs. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Deepa and Rumi, we are out of time, so we'll have to wrap up. It's 5. Honestly, I didn't realize time flying. It's been a delightful conversation, enriching as well. I've learned a lot. I continue to learn, so I'm really happy that I had an opportunity to sort of spend time with both of you and Zainab, learning a lot more about what we could do in this space. So thank you for making time today. Thank you both for joining. Thank you both for sharing your views with our audience. I think if we had more time, we could have actually posed more questions to you, but I think we have to wrap up now. So thank you both, and I look forward to hopefully hosting you again, maybe much earlier than June or September.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roadmaker.
Thank you so
Bye, Rumi.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.